And we are live. And so this is another discussion. Me, Judah McNeil, with Ford Suze. This is Reverse Redaction. And today we're going to talk about Zelda, the legend of Zelda. Oh, I'm hearing... Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, did you hear me?
I'm hearing myself.
Oh, you probably needed to mute yourself on the...
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Yeah, sorry, technical difficulty.
Okay. So, Ford, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Yeah, just a lot of computery stuff happening.
Yeah, this is the first time I think I've really gone live 3 ways at one time.
It is that kind of world.
Well, okay, so today let's get right into it. The Legend of Zelda, probably the most famous games in history. What is your favorite game, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd necessarily say that. I have such a soft spot for the old JRPGs, the Japanese RPGs from the Super Nintendo era. So,
like the Chrono Trigger and stuff.
Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, yeah. So that's my golden age of gaming, and I've never really grown out of it. I'll always be that kind of guy back in my day. But then again, after having played, I guess the post, I'm not sure what really made that change, but I don't know. It was RuneScape. I don't know, one of those games I never really played. Diablo, probably. It's like the post Diablo age where you actually live act. Is Diablo the one you're actually live action hitting people? You're not. It's not turn based or whatever.
Yeah, the Blizzard game Diablo.
Yeah. So
Activision.
and that and of course WoW. After playing games that have been influenced by that combat system, it's really hard to go back and play those JRPG turn-based games.
But Zelda was one of the... I was just doing a little research, and I saw that Zelda was one of the first to have your sword go sideways, to swoop it, right?
Well, actually, the very first Zelda, I believe it was just a poke. It was just a little poke.
But it was like Zelda 2, they changed the game, or Zelda...
Link's Awakening is the one that was side-scroller. I never played that one.
That was a side-scroller, yeah. Everybody hated that one, right?
It was,
the second one.
It was the second one. It had an overhead map, and then you would, for battles, you would go into this side-scrolling kind of thing. So it was kind of mixing both not really a platform, but yeah, kind of platform-esque fight scenes. And then, of course, not Link's Awakening.
Future, right?
A Link to the Past. That was the one.
Past. That's what it's
Super Nintendo. Yeah, and that's the one where he was swiping sideways, and that added a lot more, functionality and a lot more mechanics to the game. And yeah, I think it's one of the greats. For me, like we did go back and play the original Zelda last year, and with the kids, and it's funny playing such a bare bones version now of a video game, because you get to see I don't know, I can still remember how I felt when I played it, and how I imagine Miyamoto felt making it. Because it has this feeling of exploration. And, if you've ever walked especially in a place in Asia, I think, but, you can get the same sensation probably in Colorado or the foothills of the Appalachians or something like that, when you're just getting out there and seeing, walking over a rise and seeing, the haze on the horizon or something like that. Like, it's just, that game kind of puts you there in that way,
Which game are you talking about?
The very first Zelda. Just, I
really?
mean, yeah, it does, because back then, you didn't have the imagination. You didn't see better video games. You know what I mean? So like, it's just, every screen you're coming over the horizon in a way, because it was all just one screen at a time, and you don't know what's on the next screen. And so, when you get up to the Death Mountain area, it's scary because the villains are so difficult to fight. But now when you go back, after playing Ocarina of Time, which was the Nintendo 64 version, I'd never played Twilight Princess, but I've seen my brother-in-law play it, and after playing those, or of course Breath of the Wild, going back to the original, it almost feels like looking at a storyboard for Breath of the Wild. You know, it's like this is just like the rudimentary idea that would one day yield Breath of the Wild. Like this seems to me the incarnation of Miyamoto's vision. Like when there are just moments where you actually see the whole, you know, you get up on some vista on top of Death Mountain or on top of these certain peaks and you can just see forever. And it's just, it's breathtaking. And it's kind of like the culmination of a dream. Like when Lucas talked about making Star Wars, like he was so frustrated by the technology at the time, he couldn't really see his vision. But, you know, for most of us, when we saw what his vision was, like, you know, this CG filled vision, when the special editions came out, when they were re-released in theaters in the 90s, we're like, just go back to the original. Yeah. But after playing Breath of the Wild, I feel like you don't feel like that. You're like, oh yeah, like why would I ever go back to play the original Zelda at this point?
Right. And I guess what we're not trying to go back and say whether whether Zelda was good or bad or whether it should have been popular or not, but really kind of go back and look at the evolution. We're looking more at the evolution of gaming, right?
Yeah, and I think the difference in how technology has affected the manner in which stories are told in gaming. So whereas I feel like with literature and motion pictures, we've kind of doubled down on the original formula, and we haven't let it necessarily adapt over time. So it's how am I trying to put this? When you look at Zelda from the mid 80s, it just seems so rudimentary, you know, at this point. But there are still games that release today in our day and age that look as rudimentary as Zelda, you know, like, so Undertale looks as bad as Zelda almost, you know, maybe a little better, but probably not. It's about the same, you know, and that's 30 years later. But people are still finding ways to tell stories through video games, even with the inferior tech, you know, Minecraft, another example of that. But I feel like with filmmaking and with literature, it's almost like you have to have this completed version. Like there are no in-betweens. You know what I mean? It's like you do all the things that are necessary. You know, you have your script, you have your storyboard, you have your production team, you have your pre-production, you have your all this stuff that goes into making a finished product in literature or in film. But video games have always kind of just pushed this limit because it's a younger art form, right? And so I feel like people have been able to experiment along the way, and they didn't have the expectation of having to deliver this fully finished product, because the tech wasn't where it needed to be in order to deliver the fully finished product. So I think Miyamoto's vision happened 30 years later, like Breath of the Wild, but he didn't wait for 30 years to release. You know, he went ahead with a storyboard and was like, hey, here's the storyboard. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because that's all the tech could deliver at that time.
So in contrast to today's movies, where I feel like directors and movie makers are it feels like they're looking at how or focusing on how it looks and the tech involved in, oh, we can do this, we can do that, and the story will fit it this way. You're saying because of the lack of technology, video games have been able to evolve their story ahead of the tech. Let the tech come. Let the tech come.
And then also, and you know, something was true. It's fascinating. It's almost like a coffee table book about the Star Wars, about A New Hope and how it was made. And again, the tech kind of restricted Lucas. It restricted their production team into making something that was capable to be done. You know, it was just too big to fully encapsulate Lucas's vision. You know, they didn't have all the tech in place. And instead of, like, you know, they found cheap ways to innovate. You know, the necessity was the mother of invention for those movies. And I think those movies are the better for it. When you have an unlimited supply of money, however, you start to get a little flippant with your story. You start to get a little flippant with your world creation. And one of the things that we see from especially those early Nintendo games is their facility at using such small amounts of data to produce what they produced. You know, they invented a whole new musical form. I mean, think about what those early songs were. You know, they're just little beeps and boops and crashes that they managed to turn into music. And they've stuck with us. They've become iconic. I mean, they've stuck with us ever since. You know, the Super Mario theme, the Zelda theme, and so yeah, again, they just kind of let the limitations of technology not hold them back. And I think too often we let funding hold us back. Honestly, like you make too much money and. You know, like James Cameron with Avatar. Okay, so he created entirely new technologies in order to tell this story, but the story is nothing like Star Wars. I mean, you know, it's a summer blockbuster that will not be watched in 20 years. Like, it's just not.
Well, but so on that idea, let's contrast something like Breath of the Wild with Undertale. Undertale having such an interesting and rich story that, you know, has the story evolved? I mean, obviously Breath of the Wild, the graphics technology is amazing, but has the story evolved?
No, I think Legend of Zelda has never had good story. I've never been, I mean, the myths that they tell, they're all just, you know, this kind of wishy-washy pantheist, I don't know. And it just doesn't really ring true. I mean, if you look at like a similar worldview, mythic nature, animistic sort of thing, like if you're looking for that kind of thing from a Japanese source, Miyazaki is going to give that to you way better. I mean, you watch any one of his movies, Spirited Away, or what is the one? I'm thinking about the one with My Neighbor Totoro,
Howl's Moving Castle.
Every single one of them is just so rich. I mean, just such a rich interpretation of Japanese myth, and oh man, I mean that stuff just permeates it. Whereas Zelda, it's really just good on that level of a person walking out into the wild. Like that's what Zelda is about. Like just that they might as well just scrap all the dialogue. You know, Link never talks in any of the iterations. I'd almost prefer that no one else talks.
Well, that's why I was surprised you started talking. You went with the theme and the idea of story evolving in video games, and we started. You know, we're talking about Zelda today. I've always felt like Zelda, any Nintendo games have never had any good story, and like you said, the direction I was going to go is I feel like video games, the thing that caught my attention, you said this in a live video, is that your daughter wished, and you've always wished, that at the end you could just walk around the castle and get to know the people. And that's really where video games have gone. They've really deconstructed the story. The story has gone away, and they've just gotten into world building. You know, right. It was starting, and I think it really started with well, of course, WoW, you know, Warcraft and World of Warcraft, and then they had. Do you remember Second Life? Did you ever play Second Life?
Yeah, no, I never got into that.
It's just it's basically like World of Warcraft, where you don't fight anybody, you just walk around and make. I think you could make money, which was interesting. They had economies. I don't really know what happened to it. It kind of went away, Second Life.
Right.
But then now to what is it? Live chat?
VR chat.
VR chat. Yeah. VR chat, where people you just take on some kind of avatar and walk around and get to know people. Completely taking away story and any kind of like there's no there's no objective. You just walk around and look.
I think you know there's so many different elements of gaming, and at this point we need a better word than gaming. The Potato Vlogs mentions. Oh, I'm sorry. We're gonna hold off on chat. Is that what is our plan for?
Okay, so yeah, save your comments and questions. Well, put them down.
Put them down. We'll respond.
At the end. We're gonna respond to questions and comments.
So yes, I think.
You're saying video games are not. We need a new word for video games.
Yeah, because that was one of the things, the controversies about Gamergate was that some people were complaining about some games getting called games when they weren't really functioning as games. They're more like playable stories. I almost think we need something to better articulate, this umbrella, because there's something more than just game here. It's interactive. The interactive.
It's virtual reality.
But I don't even know if that's necessarily virtual reality. I don't know. What I've always thought about in the free will and determinism debate, which we often hear in religious circles, and so in my own tradition in Christianity, you've got the predestination crew, the Calvinists versus the people who think that we have free will. So, but that usually crops up in any sort of debate, whether you're an atheist or a theist. There's this debate between free will and determinism, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that hit me, I don't know, about 10 years ago when I was thinking about this, is that the problem with the determinist side is that if you believe that God or that biological processes, or genetics or natural selection dictate every single thing that you do, that we're just a product of our environment, and we make decisions based on what has come before us, blah blah blah. Well, the problem with that is it takes a very linear approach to human interaction, and it assumes that we live in a closed system in which there is no outside energy, and it assumes that we're not interacting, that we're not individuals with intelligences that have the capability of intervening, So I was thinking that really the Calvinist or the determinist believes that God or natural selection is writing a book, from beginning to end, and the characters in the book have no say in what the pen of the writer is writing, right?
Yeah.
But you can think about, like, film is even a little more what is the word, linear than a book, because with film it's just you're seeing it play out, mm-hmm. and it's meant to be viewed at a certain speed, whereas
it's limited.
Like with reading, like you can actually skip forward and see what's gonna, you can kind of go back and forth, but both of them are very linear, and there's the character, the viewer, the reader, the character, viewer, and reader are definitely under the author. Like, they all are subject to the author, basically. But with video games, it hit me that the player, the character in the game, there is this, all of a sudden, free will enters the equation with Super Mario Brothers.
Yes,
there's determinism, there's a goal, but what if you don't care? What if you just decide to sit on this one screen until you die? You have that option. Now, and Super Mario Brothers was extremely linear. Yeah. You're going from left to right. You can't go back to the left, but you can collect every coin. You can hit every block. You can kill every Goomba.
So have you checked out Doki
Doki Literature Club?
Yeah.
No, I haven't yet. No.
So the reason everybody loves that game is it's a little scary and feels possessed. It's taking that thing that you're talking about to a new level, where you delete files of characters and then they react to it in the game. Like they say,
interesting.
And those people die in the game, or they react to that person being missing in the game. Sometimes you'll try to put the files back and they will refuse it. It's got like a mind of its own type thing.
Interesting. Well, and I think we're going to see more and more of that, because if you look at, like, the evolution from, and this is one of the reasons I like Zelda, if you look at the evolution from Super Mario Brothers to Zelda, Super Mario Brothers linear left to right. Zelda, you can actually move around a map, so it's no longer left and right. It's no longer one dimensional. You know,
weren't they were the first to be able to go diagonal, right?
Could you go diagonal Zelda? Yeah, a little bit,
Zelda, and Zelda 3 or something like that. The third one.
But in the original Zelda, it was just screen by screen. But you still could move in 2 dimensions. You move north, south, east, west, and so that is an evolution in storytelling. And when I say storytelling, I don't mean the story. I don't mean the narrative. I mean, like in cinema, we say show don't tell. Well, video games are the ultimate in show don't tell. It's actually do don't. It's not just show don't tell. It's do don't show.
See, that's where I was. That's where I was confused when you were talking about storytelling.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the script. I'm talking about the story that you're feeling as it's much more subjective.
Experience telling, almost.
Experience telling. That's that perfect way to put it. Yeah. So it's not show don't tell. It's experience don't show. That's what video games are, and that's taking narrative from this very one-dimensional linear to this through this one-dimensional experience to a two-dimensional experience, and then finally. Not now, in Mario 64 and in Ocarina of Time, Zelda 64, you have a 3D space to explore. But that's not the real revolution that excited me. The thing that made my brain, I don't know, hurt was a moment in Chrono Trigger on the Super Nintendo. And this, to me, is one of the defining moments in author, character, consumer experience telling. Like, let's call it that. Like, it's not just storytelling. This is experience telling. So there's a moment in this game where, you make decisions in the past. You're time traveling. So spoiler, you're time traveling. So you make decisions in the past that affect decisions in the future. Now, cinema has done a pretty good job of kind of articulating some of the weirdness of this. Sci-fi has done a great job. Philip K. Dick stories. Sometimes, I feel like it has. I mean, it's at least makes you like, whoa, about stuff. I mean, even movies like Back to the Future, the first time you see it, you're just like, oh man, yeah, if he does that, then what happens? It actually makes you ask that question.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, so in Chrono Trigger, they take this to this level that cinema cannot do. It's just not possible for them to do. So you are. Back then you got this little SNES controller. It's got 6 buttons and a, LR. So X, Y, L, A, B, R, I think, 6 buttons. And then you got your little your control pad to move around. And at one point you are in the past, like the distant past. And you run into this woman and she says, hey, I've got this little seedling, this little plant over here, but the Empress says I need to destroy it. And she asks you what you should do. If you say, yeah, you should destroy it, listen to the Empress. And then you go back to the future, nothing changes. If you say, no, you should keep it. She's like, yeah, I think so too. So you leave and we go back to the future. Actually, it's in the Middle Ages. There's this hole in a desert. You're like, why is that there? So you go into the hole and there's this boss that's actually pretty difficult. You beat this boss, and afterwards they have the characters have this little cutscene and they have this conversation. And actually, I think it's actually later. Like you beat the boss, and then later on, someone's building the forest back up, and y'all have this conversation. So one thing leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another. And so you have this cutscene, and they're sitting around a fire, all the characters. And they're saying, it's weird because if this one thing hadn't happened in the future, this other thing wouldn't have happened, none of this adventure would have happened. And it's like, so it makes you wonder, how did that first thing happen that started our first time travel? And they're like, yeah, it's weird. It's almost like somebody made it happen. And so then one of the characters whose mom has been crippled the whole game, she's like the inventor character who was instrumental in them, this moment that led to their entire adventures happening when her machine malfunctioned again, but kind of weird how it happened. So there's this gate that opens up, this like wormhole that, you've been going through these to travel through time. But this one looks a little different. It's a different color. So she walks through it, and she finds herself in her house as a kid, and she's actually the kid version of herself, which that's the first time it's happened where she's actually traveled through time as herself as a kid. So she goes through, and there, you find some little documents, and one of them says, should anything happen, the password is my wife's name. And so when you walk outside into the main room, her mom's cleaning one of her husband's little invention things, because he's invented all this crap. He's got all these inventions hanging around. Well, it's like a conveyor belt, and her dress gets caught in it, and she's stuck, and she's like, help, help. And so the daughter is standing there, and you can go up to, as the daughter, you can go up to this little device, and you can put in the password, but there's no interface. So that you're like, well, what am I going to do? There's no like, oh, what should I type? It just says, will you put in the password? And so it keeps popping up on the screen, her mom shouting, help, help, please turn it off. Well, her mom's name is Lara. And all of a sudden, this moment, and I'm serious, this moment, I still think of this as like a chicken and the egg moment, like revelation. Like, I have just understood existence. Like, in this moment, I looked down at my control and realized L-A-R-A are all on the control. What if I just put L-A-R-A? That's it. So that is a moment that in the history of the universe was impossible in storytelling. Okay. Like that is a, I think it was Helen Keller or somebody talked about when they were trying to, I think someone was sharing the story. I believe it was about Helen Keller, in which someone who's trying to teach her this, how to think, how to communicate, trapped in this, inability to sense or anything, like, gave her two different objects and was like, try to put this into a thing, like guided her hands and said, like,
water. I think it was like water or something, right?
Something. Yeah. And while, she's sitting there like working through this, they said, think, and tapped her head. Like, this is what it means to think, this struggle that you're facing right now. And that was then the floodgate burst, and for me, it was that kind of moment where all of a sudden there's another great moment in The Giver in which the character experiences color for the first time. And it's just like this awakening moment. Like, that's what it was like for me, having that moment where like and you put it in perfect words there. It's experience telling. It's not just storytelling. It's not just show don't telling. It's experience telling.
You basically had a never ending story moment where the boy who's reading the book realizes he isn't
exactly. That's right. That's true. That's a great little moment in cinema right there, right? Like, that's a meta moment in which the reader and the author, but in up until video games, it would be very difficult to do that
in real life.
Like, you have to only show people having that moment. You can't actually have that moment with a consumer. And so all this, there's a lot of angst and frustration. And I quit playing video games for like 10 years because I was like, I can't waste my time doing this. There is a temptation to waste a lot of time in video games. It's probably one of the most addictive art forms that's ever been made. But make no mistake about it, it is an art form. And people can get addicted to any art form. Yeah. Motion pictures, we don't all throw motion pictures out the window because of soap operas. Soap operas are the most addictive form of motion pictures, but we don't throw them all out. And whatever your soap opera is, whether it's, a daytime soap in America or a nighttime soap in India, or Dragon Ball Z, which is a soap opera, or
WWE,
or WWE, Naruto. I mean, all these they go on forever. They are interminable, and they can always keep writing new stuff for them. And so, just because soap operas exist in motion pictures, most of us rightfully don't throw out the rest of it. We don't say, oh, because soap operas exist, let's throw out Citizen Kane. Right. Because soap operas exist, let's throw out No Country for Old Men. Like, excuse me. So, but a lot of people want to do that with video games because we've all had a tendency to be addicted. But I really truly believe, like, even with games like League of Legends, like, I have taken stuff away from it that you couldn't experience in any other way. Like, literally, you just could not do it. You know, having a moment with a kid playing, a Malaysian kid, 1,000 miles away when I was in India, or 3,000 miles away, whatever it was. And us having a moment of camaraderie. Like, you're not going to have that playing basketball. No.
So do you think that that's the next iteration? Because let's bring it back to Zelda, and I think we're talking about Zelda because of Breath of the Wild, and you being so impressed with just I remember you said you've just been spending your time walking around in the world. Yeah. Is that the next iteration where you have something like Breath of the Wild right here in your hands, and you're experiencing this world and you're accomplishing tasks? Well, I guess, isn't that just World of Warcraft? And then somebody else walks in and helps you.
Right. And I think in some ways, I mean, Zelda has always been the most simplistic of games in a way. Like, it's already been done. You have World of Warcraft, you have Elder Scrolls. I mean, I think these open world kind of and then the visuals on those, I mean, they're great. Mm-hmm. So, but I guess with Zelda, there is just this kind of childlike playful wonder about most of Zelda that really, it's kind of like, it does not in the quality of the narrative sense, but in the quality of the unification of the visuals and the play style. It feels very childlike wonder, Like, I think that's it's a wide-eyed child. Like, I got this picture on my desktop of, and I can't remember who did it, but it's just this vista, and I look at it and when you see this picture, you just want to run out past this farmhouse and run over towards the mountains. You just feel that pull. And I feel like that's what Legend of Zelda is. And it really is these games, I think it's just easy to be cynical and flippant about these things and write them off. But I have had experiences because of video games that I could not articulate any other way. And that Chrono Trigger moment for me is one of those moments. And with even with Breath of the Wild, there's this great moment for me. It's Eventide Island is one of these little side quests that you do to get to the shrine. And when you get there, you don't know what you're getting into. Like, you come up to this island and this spirit, she says, or he says, welcome to, I challenge you to try to conquer this island, but you're not going to be able to take anything that you've used so far in your journey. So you have to start from scratch. You're just down to your shorts and you have to basically like cast away your way through this island. And I stayed up all night playing that one, and I was cursing it and so angry at it. When I finally beat it, I was like, that was one of my favorite video game experiences in like a decade. Like, it's just, it just, I don't know. So there's these little moments, again, they're kind of hard to articulate why different people resonate with different parts of gaming, but there's just so much to be mined. Like, I think of Limbo, that studio that gave us Limbo and Inside, they both have these moments where you just, these kind of aha, eureka, holy crap. Like, I would not have gotten that little bit of aha, eureka, enlightenment without playing through it. Like, just seeing it, hearing it as a poem, watching it as a Broadway play, listening to it as a song. Like, none of those art forms would convey this same nuance of feeling, of experiencing the story.
Interesting. Well, then the question for me is, we always move into, what does that mean for our lives as we're building better us's, as we are making our own myth? What does that mean for us? Because I guess for me, the temptation is to just is to use that as just an escape, a beautiful escape, you know. And it becomes more of a temptation, a more of an escape the better they get.
Yep.
How do we keep, I guess the danger for me is, how do we teach our kids that a real vista is more important, is more beautiful?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that is, again, it's no different than Beethoven's Ninth or this painting that I'm looking at. I mean, you think about the amount of time that took these great painters to paint what they painted. Like it's a lot of investment. It's a lot of time. And that's people making an illusion. So if we're going to throw out video games, we have to basically take the Old Testament Jewish law, which is make no representation of the sky above or the earth beneath or the animals that walk on it, because you're going to idolize them. So it's the same. It's the same. The same temptation exists no matter what form of media we create. I think it's just we have to just be much more responsible with the tool and realize that we are dabbling in dangerous territory. We are playing God. We are co-creating here, and if we're not careful, that false world, that facsimile world, will become our world. So it has to be considered a tool and not an end. And that's, I think, pivotal.
What is the tool for, though? What are we using it for?
Well, the same thing that Catholics traditionally, or maybe even currently, or you know, the Orthodox use icons for. These things should be considered icons, not idols. They should be used as and a lot of even I would say pre-monotheistic pagan cultures did in and of themselves had this idea that their idol was not the god. Like it was something to sit in front of, to meditate on the eternal. Like it was meant more to be a mirror, a window, a gate, you know, to thoughts of the eternal. And so people that have thought about this long, and so that's why it's unfair, I think, often, for people just to look at someone who has an idol to think that they're an idiot. There's a lot of these people are thinking on another plane. Like don't just assume the worst. And so I think whatever our icons are, we need to think of them as mirrors, as through a glass darklies. Are there better ways to arrive at that? Like I'm sure. But the problem is, if we just try to, I don't know. It's a good question though. I do think you need to balance it. You need to have more time out in real nature, right? Like I learned about this weird trapdoor spider yesterday that its abdomen, it looks like a Mayan temple carving. It's got this flat, like cut off abdomen that has this pattern on it that I swear looks like someone drew it. It is the weirdest looking thing. It makes your skin crawl. Like, and I said on Twitter yesterday, I was like, I'm a dude that loves spiders, but this thing just mystifies me. What kind of adaptation is this? How did this adapt?
What does it serve? What purpose does it serve?
Right. I mean, did it literally evolve during the time of the Mayan temples? It was trying, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. This pattern makes no sense. And so, you think about like a brown recluse with its little the pattern on it, or the red hourglass on the bottom of a black widow. Like these things just boggle your mind at a certain point, and so all that to say, like, there is stuff in nature we should be paying attention to. And, I think some of our best inventions have come from looking at ecosystems or looking at creatures and be like, how did they do that? These phosphorescent creatures, these electric eels, like what in the world? These bomb beetles, that actually make an explosion with their, so we do want to spend more time outside, but we cannot pretend. Anybody who's a Luddite about video games or about tech the problem is they're not a Luddite about the thing that they like. They still, you know, they still go to Broadway plays or listen to opera or listen to Mozart or Mendelssohn or Beethoven or Stravinsky. So like,
yeah,
come on.
I mean, when it comes down to it, consuming is consuming.
Yes.
If you know, if pleasure is pleasure, if you're getting
Yeah.
pleasure from a real vista or a fake one, the key is to balance our consummation or consummation our consuming to balance our consuming with creating, I think.
Yeah,
and because
I
I believe the Imago Dei, the image of God in us, is the ability to create. I think that's the most that is the central thing in who God is the creator. We can create, you know,
right. And
we go ahead.
No, go ahead.
As we create, that's when we are, you know, that's when we're syncing with who we're meant to be, you know, as humans.
Because we're not meant to be locusts. And I think that is the difficulty. Like, I think we're all, in a way, all kind of like meth addicts for dopamine, you know, and we get it from different sources. And a lot of people blame, you know, Twitter, Facebook, oh, they're scrolling. Yeah, okay. But without that, like, okay, let's take that out of the equation. How many other addictions do we have? Oh, coffee, sugar, butter, you know, soap operas, music video, well, those don't even exist anymore, but music, whatever. I mean, there's just so many things that you can be addicted to in our day and age. And just because we are oversaturated doesn't mean that undersaturating is going to necessarily cure it, you know?
Right. Well, so what do we take into today? How do you and I and whoever watching or listening to this, what do we take from this? What do we take from Zelda today, immediately?
Like, for me, if Eventide Island, that part of Breath of the Wild, were a game, like if someone just made Eventide Island, I'd play it 10 times. Like, I'd pay $5 for it. You know, you think, okay, I pay $60 for all of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but I'd be willing to pay for it. This is like less than 1/100th of that game. You know, like that's the self-contained little mini story right there. I'd be willing to pay 1/10 of the price, maybe 1/5 of the price of the whole game just for that thing. Because it meant something like that for me. Like for Chrono Trigger, I'd pay $10 for that moment.
Man, I'd pay more than $10.
Oh yeah, you know, right? Like, but on a lot of times I find stuff like that on the internet. Wow, that was great, dude. I'm tipping you. I mean, you see these guys on Twitch, they're streaming. People are paying money hand over fist all the time just to be like, hey, dude, listen to this funny joke. You know, like what are they paying for? They're paying for the connection. They're paying for that moment, you know, and these moments often have been forced to be hidden in these giant productions. And so I think what I'm trying to do, you know, I'm starting in a very rudimentary way. I'm going to start with narrative and essay and maybe, you know, video on my website. But I'd like eventually, through the course of this year, learn some rudimentary Boolean values to incorporate into the JavaScript so that people can have an interactive experience of my story that I want to tell.
That Chrono Trigger story helps me understand you so much better. Like your hatred of websites like that really like lets me understand what you are trying to accomplish, you know?
Yeah, that to me, like, honestly, that's one of the most defining moments of my life, was that aha moment with that controller right there. And I feel like there's probably so many of those things in video games I haven't played, and I feel like if you just get those moments in and of themselves out on the web, like people would be like, oh yeah, you know, like if one person could make one Eventide Island or that moment from Chrono Trigger, which isn't as big, it's not even as big of an investment in terms of scale as Undertale was. I mean, Undertale was a big scaled project, even though it was, you know, rudimentary in terms of graphics. So I feel like there are markets now because of the internet where you can do these kind of self-contained vignettes, you know, short story video games, basically, in which these moments, and then they can try and cross-pollinate. And again, I just feel like we're going to see a lot more of this in the next 30 years in cinema, in literature, in music, where people say, hey, in music, I got this 8-bar phrase. I have no idea what to do with it after that. Hey, I've got this chorus. I have no idea what to do with it after
Well,
that. Then,
Joseph Gordon-Levitt's a hit record. Have you ever? Yeah, you've interacted with that, right? There's something off about it, right?
It just doesn't work. It's just still too centralized, and it's still just too. I don't know. I tried it.
I tried it too.
I actually was in it on one of these videos, but you know, it ended up being used in a way that I was like, I was just a tool, you know. I was like, that was not my message. Like,
but that's not the danger, but that's what you have to. That's the cost,
okay,
right?
Well, no, yeah, that's the to me, that's more of the, what is the word? Yeah, danger, but it's almost like more of the cautionary tale. Like that's the cautionary hit record for me is more the cautionary tale of how this could work out. An example of how it can work out in music that is inspiring is Old Crow Medicine Show's Wagon Wheel. So that started off as a chorus from Bob Dylan 30 years before. And Old Crow Medicine Show took that chorus, rock me, baby, mama, like a wagon wheel, rock me, baby, any way you feel. Hey, mama, rock me. They took that, and then they wrote these great 3 verses around it with a little, you know, rustic violin solo. And that song is a great little bit of storytelling. Like, that could only be told in this folk, you know, country way, that it's just complete narrative, perfect little poem. And that is one of these areas of kind of open source collaboration. That and if you think about the best, I mean, some of the best art in history has been reinterpretations of old stories. I mean, how many times was a story of what's his name, Mephistopheles and Dr. Faust. That story has been told, you know, numerous times. How Shakespeare has informed the way we think through his coined terms. And so the more I think we can get to think about these things in smaller forms, and we have, you know, Shakespeare didn't have Twitter. Can you imagine that dude having Twitter now? Come on. Like that. I mean, he would be inventing a new phrase a week. He would be inventing a new phrase an hour. And we'd be, oh man.
And I hate to say it, but it is sort of, we're watching it. Trump has taken it to a new level. Now, unfortunately, he's not the best.
Well, yeah, no, but I mean, yeah. So invariably with great power comes great responsibility, right? So what you're going to see at the beginning of any technological innovation is the muck rising to the top. And you know, Trump plays that because he knows how to play that game, because that's what our game has become. Everyone wants to blame him. They need to blame JFK first. Like he was the one that leveraged televised beauty to his own political advantage instead of rhetoric. Oh yeah, let's all blame Trump for this. Like, no, and this is the evolution of what happened.
He just took a televised beauty. So that was the zeitgeist of the time, or right. Redundant. And now he's saying, whether he knew it or not, he took online trollery.
Online trollery and Jeffrey Springerification, you know, of just, and, you know, like just the fact that man, we're about to get into Ford rant. I'll say this much, like Oprah having the audacity to say what she said at that awards show the other day. You know, she made her career off of fake news. She made her career off of like false, like leveraging the food pyramid and, you know, these false weight loss schemes that didn't even work for her in the long run. I mean, she is the richest entertainer on the planet Earth. She's black and she's a female. She's richer than any white male actor on Earth. And she has the audacity to talk about, you know, bad opportunities, making money off of exploiting people's, you know, fears and desires and wanting to get more. Oh, look at me, I'm giving away money. Oh, look at me, I'm giving away these people. Well, yeah, and it's really hurting you there. You're making more money off the back end. That's a great marketing campaign. So she's a reality TV show star too. Okay, so we're going to have another war of the reality TV shows. The difference between Oprah and Trump is that Trump is self-aware. I think Oprah actually believes she's a benefactor of mankind. Trump just is self-aware that he's a greedy a-hole.
Oh yeah.
But he comes off as a greedy a-hole, and he is a greedy a-hole, but he's a greedy a-hole that is actually trying to make things run. Oprah is greedy and is masquerading as an angel of light. And but she doesn't know she's greedy, and that's the thing. Like, Trump knows he's greedy. Like, who do you want? You want someone who's so. Anyways, I'm sorry. I just launched us into
Frant.
Dude is not a member of the alt-right. I know in that moment I sounded like I'm a member of the alt-right. I think Trump is a douche. Yes, I get it. But how do we get on this topic?
I don't know. But to get back, that's my fault. I brought it in because we're talking about Twitter. And what if some of the greats had Twitters, like what's his name?
Shakespeare. I mean, Shakespeare had Twitter. Okay, so it wouldn't rise to the top. The Trumps of the Twitter world would rise to the top because it's this dopamine addicted controversy, conflict, drama, soap opera. Yeah, the soap operas always rise to the top. Okay, we get that, but that does not negate the fact of what remains in the long run. The Trumpism tweets are not going to remain 50 years from now. Right. These unknown Twitter accounts now that have like 100 followers, but are tweeting like this just incredible philosophy or incredible cultural criticism. Like, that stuff is going to rise to the top. It will. It just takes time. Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper was more important than anything probably that Trump has ever tweeted. It was sent to the small group of, cryptography enthusiasts in 2009. And next thing you know, he has changed the world forever. I mean, that was the Gutenberg print and press moment. That was, Luther's 95 Theses on the Wittenberg church door. These things start off as small things, but we are in a world now where you don't have to go to, every church door and we got 100 million churches in this world. Yeah, good luck attacking some theses on these church doors when they're doing something stupid. Good luck going to every Federal Reserve or every bank and trying to get them to, change their ways. But this stuff, it still will take time, but 9 years as compared to, 500.
Yeah.
What Luther did with the 95 Theses, it's still not complete. Like, we still have centralized control of religion in 2018, in which money, politics, power are all still embroiled with religion, and all around the world. So, I mean, his middle finger now, his fist in the air to the religious elite, using God as a means for political power and to enslave people. His fist in the air, like, it's still not done. That move has not completed yet, and that took 500 years. So, you look at Bitcoin, 9 years. I mean, it's still not done. And it may not be successful, but the die is cast. Like, we're not going back.
I totally agree, and I think that ties in to what do we do about it today? And I think, going back to the idea of the Vista, how do we look at our own lives today as we operate in the world? What are we providing? What Vista are we creating for others? Thinking about our own lives, everything that we create and interact with today. Right. What kind of Vista are we providing? What kind of message are we forwarding? And what are we doing to build not just a better us, but build a better world?
Yeah. And I think, for me this year, it's just trying to, gain more self-control, gain more kindness, gain more attempts to understand. I used to be very good at that. I feel like back in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, my first couple years in India, I really just went out of my way and I tried to understand people's arguments. And then at some point, I just reached a critical mass of and I spread myself too thin. And the frant, like my frant, just even in this one is just, my attempts to understand just breaking, and I just, resolve to something that feels comfortable to me. I want to get out of that. I don't want to be the franter in 2019. So 2018, I want to be able to actually hold conversations with people. I don't think Oprah is an evil person. I think she really genuinely believes in what she's doing. I think so many of us are we're just so conditioned by the cultural climate in which we live, or the economic environment in which we find ourselves, that we follow the rules according to the system that we're in, and we're being the best that we can in that environment. But the environment itself is just wrong. It's not working. It does not scale. It does not bring the justice that we hope to bring to the people we want to bring it to. And as someone who's trying to do that in some small way in India, I realized even my efforts that I thought were actually helping people were not helping Indians. It was good intentions, but it was misguided and it was tweaked, So I feel like what I'm trying to do is, first of all, build a better me so that I can better communicate with other people who I might otherwise disagree with. And in the meantime, give an experience mediated by the web that is like those experiences that really changed my way of thinking. Those were just epistemological realizations as I played video games, but I think it can apply to other areas. I think you can come up with new innovations in some of the problems that we're facing in the real world through these art forms. And I want to try to find a way to make a little, maybe it's not even a short story. Maybe it's not by the end of 2018. It's a short story version of those experiences in video games on my website. Maybe it's more like a tweet. Maybe it's more like a poem. Maybe it's more like, a haiku. Like I do the haiku version of that somebody in a minute can be like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's not going to be like the same level of depth or whatever, but build up towards those grand moments of enlightenment, that, try to tease out what in the world, how'd you put it? Instead of show, don't tell. Yeah. Experience, don't tell, like help my viewers and collaborators. Yeah. Experience telling in a new way. So,
well, and I think, for all of us, for me, for you, like you call it frant, but it's like rants in general are feeling like it's, I think, at least in me, it is when I get to a point and I'm trying to communicate with somebody and I'm actually communicating with problems in the world, and I feel like I can't break through, and it's that feeling like I can't, my values, my convictions, you can't hear me. And I think that's where creativity comes. I think rants are a good way to for us to see in ourselves when we see them, like to see what the problem is, but and to help us sort of break out of like, I'm just going to do what everybody tells me or whatever's, PC. But then we have to create, and like you said, build, we have to build out of that. We have to build something. We have to create. And so through our creativity, help people understand us, because that's what it comes down to for me, is like, I want people to understand me. And I believe I have something to say. I don't think it's the absolute, this is what you need. This is your truth. This is what truth you need. Of course, I feel like that in the moment. But really, I just want them to get me. And that's what we're doing here.
Yeah. And I think, as far as rants go, maybe it would be instructive for me. And I have started to do this rather than make those rants public, video yourself ranting and then go back and watch it when you're in a good place. When you actually just had a good conversation with somebody who would, if they saw that rant, would make their skin crawl, or their stomach turn, and go back and watch it after a good interaction with them and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I still feel this frustration, but I don't want to communicate it like that. Is there a creative way I can channel that to communicate it in a way that could make them understand it too? And I think a good example of that for me, again, is Joss Whedon. We are so diametrically opposed politically, socially, culturally, but there have been moments in his storytelling where we're both like, yep, I'm on your side on that one, dude. Like what are those? Like, can I communicate to someone else, as different as Joss Whedon is from me? Can I communicate something through my art that would be like, he'd be like, yeah, okay, I get you there. We may not have this, but I get you there. I don't want to go to war with you because of that.
And that's what art is.
Right.
That
and then
commonality, finding common ground. That's what art is, right?
Yeah. Find that common ground, and hopefully, most of it can be constructive, or so that you can think, well, maybe there is a way through this debate. Maybe there is something on the other side of that. Maybe we can move forward.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody has this has been a great conversation, and I don't think anybody has waited through the whole hour for question time. But if there are any questions, feel free to leave it on Ford's Facebook, my Facebook, just hashtag reverse redaction. Also, you can go to redaction.com and leave a comment on any of the posts there. Also, I can set up a little forum for us to have questions and answers. But for now, I think we've used up all our time. Well, go ahead.
The Potato Vlogs did mention Minecraft, which I think would be a good example of user interaction. You talk about creating your own houses, creating your own mini games within the world. That's been a good example of a lot of another layer of experiential telling. I guess.
Yeah, it's amazing.
There's no story in Minecraft.
I know it blows my mind how much time I and my kids can spend in this little dumb world making dumb little things, not really accomplishing anything. Well, I guess building a house is kind of, but like there's no gameplay, right? It's just that is sort of the pinnacle of course, the Vista. It goes back to what you're saying about like adjusting your expectations to what the medium you have, right?
Yes, that's true. That's a good way of putting it. Adjusting your expectations to the medium you have. And I think people are much more willing to do that than we give them credit for. People are willing to, suspend their disbelief given the rules of the world that they're in, So I think we need to think about that when we're telling our stories, not to think, oh, it's so big, because we're just so conditioned by blockbuster Hollywood to think, oh, it's got to be sexy and big and overproduced and, CG.
Yeah. Well, that does it for me. You have any final thoughts?
Good.
All right. Well, what was the thing? Get to work. There's a lot to build, right?
Make your own myth.